from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please note that there is a fire alarm test scheduled for 10:15 a.m. this morning. Can I welcome members of the public to the meeting this morning? Those of you who have asked to make representations, I will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first item is apologies for absence, and I have apologies from Councillor Becker. The second item is any changes to membership of Cabinet committees, and I have no such changes. The third item is disclosures of interest, and I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of item number 8 and 10 on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I also need to declare the same, that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of items 8 and 10, but there's no material conflict of interest regarding these items. And I have a dispensation granted by Audit and Governance Committee that enable me to speak and vote on these matters too. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have the next item is listing the requests from councillors to speak. I have requests from Councillor Cook, who I can't see, to speak on item 8. Councillor Laming to speak on item 9. Councillor Lee to speak on items 8, 9 and presumably 12 as well. Councillor Tippett Cooper to speak on item 8. And Councillor Horrell and Godfrey on 8, 9 and 12. Have I understood that correctly, at least for those councillors who are here? Looks like it. Okay. We now have two members of the public who want to speak on items on the agenda. We have Mr. Tate, back there, okay, who wants to speak on item 8 and item 9, and I think you want to do that at the time of the agenda item. And Lucy Taylor from the Winchester Lido Group, who wishes to speak on item 8. Welcome to the meeting. The next item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held on 18th of June 2025. Cabinet, can we agree that those minutes are a correct record of the meeting?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Item number 7 is leader and cabinet announcements. Do we have any announcements today? I think we had full council a few days ago, so not much to add. Okay, no announcements today. So we move on to the first substantive item of business, which is the future of the former leisure centre site, pages 11 to 42 in your pack. Because Councillor Becker, in whose name this is, isn't here, I will say a few words of introduction. As we all know, the University of Southampton confirmed a couple of months ago that while they were committed to the city, and indeed they're running a consultation on their plans for the main North Wall site tomorrow, while they remained committed to the city, they did not want to progress their plans for the former leisure centre. And so we have a report in front of us today which is seeking approval to market the site on a long lease in order to find a new investor who can enable its redevelopment for economic, social, community benefit and generate a capital receipt for the council. We're keen to move ahead so that this is completed before local government reorganisation comes along. We're keen that it is done in a way where local people have a chance to have their say. And as you know, on June the 26th, there was a consultation event in the Guildhall, and we've also had online consultation to hear people's views on the options they'd like looked at for the site. And the plan also makes clear that there will be at least 2 more rounds of engagement associated with the plan. So it sets out the results of that feedback. And if you look at, I think it's paragraph 6.4, you see the word Lido written in extremely large writing, but also a whole range of other inputs, but very much focused on community benefit for the area. The paper lays out the approach to market the site for sale and to find a new investor and the valuation criteria as set out in paragraph 11.8. It confirms that there will be further resident engagement events following the receipt of expressions of interest and also following the final bid as part of the ongoing commitment to hearing from residents and stakeholders, and authorises the budget necessary to do the work that's laid out in the paper in order to progress this approach. So I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It's true to the principles that I laid down when I announced that we were starting this process, that the park itself is wholly out of scope, that the public have a proper say in the process, and the provision of the skate park and indoor bowling must be absolutely protected. And indeed, those principles were backed by the public in the first round of consultation. So that's the paper in front of us today. Before we move on to cabinet discussion, I'd like to ask first members of the public to come forward and then councillors to make the points they have on what's in front of us today. So Mr. Tate, can I ask you to come forward and make your point?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. As some members will recall, back on the 9th of March 2022, I addressed Cabinet supporting the proposal to lease the former leisure centre site to the University of Southampton. I mentioned then, and I've mentioned many times, the brilliant art project back in October 2009, 10 Days at the Laundry, which demonstrated to me, who's not within the artistic field, that people in Winchester want better gallery performance and exhibition space. Winchester, if anything, it's a bit of a desert when it comes to the arts, and hence why the Hat Fair isn't going to take place in the coming year. What does that say about Winchester? You know, I supported that scheme wholeheartedly against a lot of criticism by local residents who have other views. I am a local resident. There have been regular public consultation and there is still a great deal of interest from the community about what will happen to the site. As I said at the recent town forum, my sources at the university have told me that the university lost patience with the indecision of this administration and just couldn't wait any longer. Why is it that the administration finds it so difficult to make key decisions? The old leisure centre building looks appalling. It's falling apart. Members should feel, like I do, ashamed of it. What an advertisement for Winchester. And as I mentioned when I spoke at the town forum, people who come to Winchester for the park run, and that's a big event now, and what do they see? An appalling building. The sign, the board outside hasn't been updated. I mentioned at the town forum. When the council engaged with the public back in 2022, my views may not have been the prevailing views, but what were the conclusions? Why do we need to run a new, very short and I think somewhat inadequate public consultation event? There seems to be very little joined up thinking going on, and it feels that we are just going round in circles. And I did wonder whether it's even worth making any comments at Cabinet. I would support anything that the Cabinet can come forward if it's deliverable. Please get on and sort it out now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian. Lucy Taylor, if you'd like to come and make your points.
Lidos are not just about swimming. They're what Deborah Iden from the Future Lidos group calls the right to joy. Members of the council, I'm here today representing thousands, over 3,000 people who signed a petition calling for a Lido at River Park in 2021. This is a clear and growing call for a Lido that aligns beautifully with the vision in the emerging Winchester District Local Plan, a healthier, more inclusive, more vibrant Winchester. Lidos are making a comeback. Old Lidos are being restored, from the Grange Lido in Cumbria, the Brynaman Lido in Wales. New Lido projects are being initiated up and down the country, in London, in Somerset, in Manchester, led by passionate local communities and visionary local authorities and creative developers. Here in Winchester, support has been overwhelming. Over 3,024 signatures to our 2001 petition, 6,000 website hits, letters to the Chronicle, widespread support on our social media accounts. In the council's own survey, as Councillor Todd said, Lido was the biggest word on your Wordle. And why? Because Lidos matter. They are good for our physical and mental health. The local plan's Living Well objective calls for improvements in health and well-being through access to recreation and nature. A Lido delivers exactly that. It's not simply about swimming, it's about community, mental health, connection to nature, and access to transformative experiences. The data shows that the health benefits of swimming saves the NHS £357 million per year. Lidos build community. At a time when loneliness is at record levels, Lidos create space for connection, joy, and belonging. They're inclusive, appealing to young people, to families, especially to women and teenage girls who are too often left out of leisure planning. Economically, a Lido would support jobs, boost hospitality and retail tourism by drawing in visitors to our city, and in this way feed into the local plan's economic objectives to foster a vibrant local economy. And there is no better site than River Park. It's central, accessible, already a leisure hub, and belongs to the people of Winchester for public recreation. It's a much-loved community resource, and in the face of more intense heat waves and rainfall, the removal of tarmac on this site can only be a good thing. On behalf of the 3,024 residents who signed our petition and many more who took part in your consultation on the future of the Leisure Centre, we urge you to work with partners who are ready to help make a Lido at River Park a reality, a place for health, a place for community, and a place for joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I now move to the councillors who wish to make a comment, and then we'll respond to the points that have been made. So, Councillor Cook, would you like to come forward?
Morning, Chair, Leader. Thank you for allowing me to address the Cabinet this morning. A decision was made on the 4th of March 2022 to grant a 5-year option period over the River Park Leisure Centre, site to the University of Southampton, for which no money changed hands and there was no signed contract. You may recall that I asked the question at the members' briefing and was told exactly that. What's more, there was no legal obligation of the university to apply for planning consent or to take forward any plans to develop the site. However, Following 4 years of inaction, in March this year, it was announced that the university was withdrawing from the agreement. What other commercial organisation or responsible public authority would enter into such a nebulous agreement with such clear disadvantages to the taxpayer? Is this not wrong? Would any private company agree to sell their property without an exchange of contracts, accompanied by a financial deposit or even a penalty clause for failure to not see it through? What's more, from the response of a Freedom of Information request, we see that the university never wanted it anyway. A terse email from the strategic director of the university to Winchester's chief executive was sent on the 17th of April 2019 with the subject various matters. Morning, Laura. In fact, the other name was redacted. Drove over yesterday to have a look and fed back to me in the evening. Although the location is great, it seems the size, planning limitations and potential land clearance clean-up issues all make it a no-goer for what we need in Winchester. I've not spoken to this person, but based on this, we would focus on upgrading and redeveloping Erasmus rather than a new build. Sorry. This was the only show in town. It was a block-out agreement and no one knows what will happen next. The 5-year option period prevented any other party from putting forward alternative proposals for the site. It is costing taxpayers thousands of pounds to ensure, to keep it secure and to maintain this building. At a cabinet meeting on the 8th of February last year, a budget was set for its demolition. But we're now told that the university has pulled out and there's no longer any money available. What's more, the Cabinet paper report says that an investor partner will have to review whether or not they can reuse the buildings for their proposals as set out in the council's draft local plan, reflecting the embodied carbon in the existing structure. Yet a council commission survey in 2013 said the building suffered from massively significant defects, rendering it not fit for purpose. And for decommissioning report in June 2020, as a CAB paper 3242 said that RPLC has reached the end of its economic and usable life. It beggars belief that the council is now contemplating putting its eggs in one basket, allocating or wishing to allocate a budget of £130,000 to undertake a fruitless exercise and even boasting about generating capital for its council, which cannot be used because that is public money, any purpose but needs to be ploughed back into the recreation ground. Now we also hear the car parking spaces are said to be up for grabs by the investor partner, which seems all wrong, given the need for them by many users of the rec. There was such a short notice of so-called public consultation, it may be said, that just for the city rather than the district that could not have made this. The timings were 3 till 7 on a weekday, and it was impossible for most people to make it. I think there were on the day 110, if I'm not mistaken, that were actually completed, although there were up to 1,000 through the consultation. So it just leaves me to say, Cabinet, you've got some big decisions to make here. I appreciate that. But the recommendation in this Cabinet report is fraught with risk, and I would urge you all to think again and vote against them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Cook. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. And a quick thank you to the officers for the June Councillor update on the former Leisure Centre. It was reassuring to have confirmation that this site is a district asset and not just a city one. After the June update, I briefed the Central Meon Valley Parish Councils and highlighted the opportunity to attend the 26th of June resident stakeholder engagement session. No surprise, some concern about this limited access to the residents from the outer district. I flagged this by email to Councillor Beck and officers and asked how future engagements will better include the wider district. I've had no reply, so can I ask again, please, what are the plans for a truly district-wide inclusive engagement? Reusing the brownfield site to support local communities and meet our greener, faster ambitions is obviously the right goal. Fully support that. That must include, of course, best alignment between any successful development bid, the surrounding green space and the future of the skate park and the indoor bowling. It's a shame this alignment wasn't secured some time ago, as already been highlighted, to avoid the current building deterioration with ongoing costs and visual blight. Securing the asset's future ahead of a unitary transition is also wise, but what if the the expression of interests are not viable? Will more funds be spent on remarketing? Is May the 2026 a hard deadline? Or could we extend the process as long as it doesn't overlap with the unitary authority transition? I note the councillor's provision for demolition, if there's no viable expression of interest that emerges, but no funding to make good the site. Where would this funding come from? And what would remediation involve? Demolition also conflicts, as we've just heard, with our environmental goals due to the loss of embodied carbon and waste generation. That is a clear concern. Regarding the £78,000 for surveys, around 60% of the marketing budget, shouldn't most of these surveys be commissioned by the buyer? Should we reduce costs to just a basic condition survey, especially given our budget pressures? Finally, I have a concern about the emerging local plans, new policy NE17, rivers, watercourses and their settings, which I suggest is now a material consideration for future planning for this site, particularly as it's in a flood risk zone, now requiring a minimum of 10-metre buffer, not the 8 metres as mentioned on page 22, between the development and the rivers. I believe that emerging from Hampshire Isle of Wight Trust and Natural England is guidance to suggest the rivers should be 20-metre buffer and 100 metres for sensitive habitats like chalk streams. So I'm a little bit concerned. I've raised this disconnect with the local planning inspector during the examination, and our planning and nature teams but received no response about these concerns. Given our nature emergency declaration and the forthcoming nature improvement plan and the local nature recovery strategy, any development close to the River Itchen should, I believe, consider these wider protections. Do we think we can reconcile these issues with the intentions for the site? Council could be putting at risk a spend or proposal that may not pass these high environmental tests. Nature protection and restoration, including avoiding harm to this precious chalk stream, may be better served by alternative approaches on this sensitive site, even if that means lower financial returns. Have these issues been fully considered? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm unclear. Councillor Laming, did you want to speak on this item or the next item? This one. Okay, sorry, my notes were wrong earlier in the meeting. If you'd like to come forward.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I do have serious concerns with this paper, as the emerging local plan examination is yet to be completed. The plan is not sound and lawful until the inspector's report has been submitted and approved by the Secretary of State. This makes it premature for the Cabinet to make any decision at all about the site. In the current local plan, there's no policy cover in this area, as it's arguably open space. The proposed policy W10, which defines the RPLC site as a new development application, submissions were made to the inspector that the policy fails the soundness test under paragraph 35 of the National Planning Policy Framework, in that the proposed change of the user from public recreation use to a learning and non-residential institution is not justified, and there has been no needs assessment. There is no appropriate strategy, no account has been taken of any reasonable alternatives, and it is not based on any proportionate evidence. It is not evident that there is no evidence that any development will be deliverable over the planned period. It is not consistent with national policy, as it is not in accordance with the policies under the PPF, Moreover, it is inconsistent with the council's own climate emergency action plan, as well as other policies in the draft plan, which provide the council and should provide access to a network of high quality open spaces, opportunities for sport and physical activity, and all of which is important for the health and well-being of the communities and can deliver wider benefits for nature and support efforts to address climate change. Furthermore, the council acknowledges that there is a shortfall of public open space in the city, especially in St Bartholomew Ward, following its takeover of Winnall in 2016. This is a Zone 3 flood risk area and no current assessment exists. The site lies in the pivotal position as the River Itchen and its tributaries converge immediately around and under the site before flowing down into the city centre. Was William Walker's arduous work under the cathedral in vain? Will the historic city mill finally collapse into a raging torrent beneath it? Will our high street and shops be submerged beneath the welter of sewage? And as I ask you, the Derngate flood relief scheme is exactly that. It only provides defence and doesn't prevent cataclysmic floods. No account has been taken in policy W10 or in the cabinet report of the accessibility issues, of the effect of the extra traffic and an already overburdened road infrastructure in Winchester City, or the serious parking difficulties. It is remarkable that the RPLC car park is deemed to be available for any investment partner with a successful bid for the site. The car park is dedicated to the parking for users of River Park recreational ground. For instance, those engaging in activities such as rugby, football, tennis, cricket, junior and senior park runs, canoe club, indoor and outdoor bowls club, skate park, and an informal recreation such as dog walking and ball games. There is nothing to say of the large-scale events enjoyed with wide audience and many festivals and annual round table fireworks display, which Winchester's biggest charity event are held in the park. As there are many runs for charities such as the Race for Life event and Finishing Point in Winchester, half marathon and triathlon, the traffic question is addressed very thoroughly when the council were looking at the new leisure centre. Traffic analysis showed that by moving the facility to Bar End, city traffic would be reduced by at least 8%. Is this not now a consideration? I'm also concerned that this is not a brownfield site, nor is it previously developed land in legal terms. Little account has been taken of the statutory trust and the vendor's covenant on the land. This was purchased in 1902 by the residents of the city and by public subscription, and then a levy on each household. The city council are merely custodians of the land, and legal complexities entailed in selling or leasing to a third party, especially for the purpose of other than public recreation, would present real problems. Let the public come up with a viable, properly considered, appropriate proposal for the land to remain in public ownership or public recreation. I urge you not to adopt the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Who's next? Councillor Tippett Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm a ward councillor in St Bartholomew's ward. I live about 100 yards away from the leisure centre, and I'm very excited about this paper. So the old leisure centre site is an important piece of River Park, and I can assure you that local residents are very excited about the plan you have in front of you today. So it is clear the council itself cannot spend millions of pounds redeveloping this site on its own. Local authority budgets don't extend that far, and there's reference to that in your paper about TC25, for example. So an investment partner is key. To help us with the funds, the resources, and the ideas to develop this site. And this is true now, and it was true a few years ago. So the University of Southampton was that partner before, but delays in what were unsuccessful legal challenges led to the University of Southampton pulling out, And some are now arguing that delay again here is the process to follow. But I would strongly urge any further delay to the development of this site. The danger is, and it is a real danger, that we lose the opportunity to make the decision at a much more local level, with a much more local authority leading that decision. And it risks further delay with further sort of years of a dilapidated site, and ultimately a decision that will be taken further away from the community. So the current roadmap in the paper in front of you has a series of public consultations events, and it shows the real commitment to engaging the local community. I have no idea if the successor authority to Winchester City Council would have the same sort of focus and emphasis on ensuring that the public are involved in this decision. So the council does need to act now on this, and quickly, to get support from an investment partner and start the process that's in the paper in front of you. And indeed, those opposing the paper in front of you have given absolutely no alternative to progressing it and enhancing this site and doing something about it. And it's impossible, members, that a viable proposal that comes forward from an investment partner will get the support of everybody in Winchester. But the process in front of you at least ensures that you get the best sense of what people really want and what is also possible legally and financially. But regardless of the reasons the University of Southampton decided not to proceed, it is so vital we look forward now, and we look forward to this process. There are lots of exciting ideas that I'm sure will come forward, and people are very excited, as I say. Now, the survey in front of you shows real support for a Lido and community leisure facilities. And indeed, if a Lido provider were to come forward with a viable plan, that would be fantastic. And it was really exciting and really good to hear from Lucy Taylor today. Now, all of this comes at a time when River Park users, including those using Parkrun, are seeing the council building a fantastic new £2.3 million pavilion in this park. Mr. Tate didn't mention that pavilion, nor the improvements to the football pitches that happened recently, the improvements to the tennis courts that happened recently, which you can book for £40 a year and use for free after that. Nor did he mention the upgrades to the North Walls playground. So all of these happened in recent years, and all of these are examples of the council showing real commitment to the investment in River Park. Ian's talking behind me now. I didn't talk when he was speaking, so I asked he didn't talk when I'm speaking. And at the end of the process you're continuing today, we'll have an exciting new project on the old Leisure Centre site that will see one of the final pieces of River Park come together, that final piece of investment that will see the park become the fantastic gem, even better fantastic gem that it is now. This process is a really good one that opens the opportunity to everyone, organisations, both private and community organisations, to propose viable schemes to support the council to transform the site. It is also a process, as I say, that gives people a say every single step of the way. I encourage people to look at the diagram roadmap that's been published, and members, I really encourage you to support this paper. It's what people want, and it's really exciting to see what could go on that old Leisure Centre building site in the next stage of this process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tipper Cooper. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may offer my apologies to my colleague, Councillor Horrell, who has been called into an unscheduled governor's meeting at her school, and she hopes to join later in the meeting. I was one of the many councillors and residents that told you that the agreement with the University of Southampton was a poor way to proceed. As we told you back 3-4 years ago, but many times, this shabby backroom deal had little chance of optimising the use of this valuable community asset. I'm pleased that best value consideration is now being stated as a factor in this paper, when it is so clearly not considered before the ill-fated and poorly conceived agreement with the university. When 9 years ago I announced as leader this council's commitment to build the new leisure centre, I also announced that the old leisure centre will be redeveloped as soon as the new leisure centre was opened. We propose development of a building that would benefit the community and would not be required to make a financial contribution towards the cost of a new leisure centre, to ensure that all options for something really interesting remains possible. It is deeply disappointing that 5 years later, nothing has happened on the River Park site. Certainly, this administration has succeeded in ensuring that no financial contribution towards the new leisure centre has come forward. But now is the time to do something of interest for the owners of this land, the residents of this district. I accept the need to dispose of this sensitive asset, but I disagree with the paper's clear intent to limit the use that might be made by a developer. Let them bring forward plans and do not try to limit what commercial interests might see as possible or desirable. For instance, in section 3.15, it states that the indoor bowls and skate park functions will continue in their current location, which may or may not be the case. These areas are not included in the scope of this paper, but may be included by any potential scheme that comes forward, as, for instance, was anticipated by the University at Southampton at one stage. Similarly, section 1.4 makes mention of a covenant on the use of the site as ruling out any form of housing. That covenant is shrouded in aged legal terminology, as the paper tries to explain. This restriction is open to many interpretations. Leave it to others to put a value or a restriction on it. Do not try, as a council, to limit their interest, just when you are trying to maximise their appetite for an investment. The actions of this administration have already cost many hundreds of thousands in expenditure without any progress, and probably lost millions in the opportunity cost of delay and uncertainty caused. Stop wasting taxpayers' money. Cut the dividend delay. Move this project forward quickly without shackling it unnecessarily. Sell the interest of the land to those who know how best to use the land without trying to continue to exercise control without responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Godfrey. And I would correct you on a couple of points. Firstly, paragraph 3.15. The guidance that we have given is that the skate park be continued to be provided and that indoor bowling be provided, but we have not been specific about where it should be on the site, and that's certainly my interpretation of the paper as well. I remember an MTFS discussion, medium-term financial strategy discussion, when you were leader, or maybe it was after you were leader. There were a lot of changes around that time, which absolutely made clear that there should be a financial contribution as a result of the new leisure centre. I don't know if colleagues have the same recollection, but I'm seeing some head nods. Okay, let's have a look at the points that were made. I mean, first of all, obviously, a range of views. Lots of people, some people telling us to do nothing. Some people telling us to be completely unrestricted in terms of how we proceed. Some people telling us to be more restrictive in terms of how we proceed. So a full range of views, but I was encouraged that the two members of the public that spoke were both very firmly on the side of doing something with the site. And so starting with Mr. Tate's point, I absolutely with you in terms of, and thank you for your support on the decision to lease to the University of Southampton back in 2022. I think it's important, as was touched on by Councillor Tippett-Cooper, to mention that the primary cause of the delay was not of the council's making, but as a result of, as Councillor Tippett-Cooper put it, abortive legal challenges that were proved to be wholly unfounded. But unfortunately took up a large amount of time and were rejected repeatedly by judges and the courts. Although I will admit that the first judicial review was correct, although on a minor technical point. Certainly the subsequent ones were thrown out repeatedly. In terms of And I'm pleased that Mr. Tate highlighted the importance of being deliverable, and indeed what you have in front of you today is exactly that. Thank you very much indeed also to Ms. Taylor for her comments about Lido. Absolutely, we have heard that. We have been contacted by Lido providers. We have encouraged them to take part in this process, and we will actively communicate with people in that space as we go forward. I mean, that is a fair summary of our position, is it, Mr. Bakey? There's certainly no intention, every intention to encourage anybody who expresses that kind of interest to proceed in the process. We then entered into a bit of a discussion about the history of the site. There was a discussion about the fact that the university didn't want it in 2019, and then they did in 2022, and then they did not later in 2025. And I confess to being slightly confused by Councillor Cook's points, who is complaining about us not having got somebody investing in the site, but also doesn't want us to get somebody to invest in the site and under the process laid out in these papers. Councillor Lee raised a point. There was also a point about surveys raised. I think Councillor Cook saying that we shouldn't do surveys, Councillor Lee saying that we should do surveys on transport and flooding. Councillor Laming complaining about the fact that we hadn't done surveys and should have done surveys. I think what we have in the paper, which is that we will do surveys to provide an efficient basis for potential bidders to understand what they will be able to do. It makes sense for us to do it once rather than for 20 bidders to do it once. That seems sensible, and it is an approach we have taken on most of our major projects, where we try and de-risk the decision-making process and encourage people to come forward by removing as much uncertainty as we can from the position that they'll be entering. Now, Councillor Lee raised a substantive point about rivers, watercourses and their setting, and there's a discussion about the buffer, whether it should be 10 metres, 20 metres or 100 metres. Obviously 100 metres would mean there wouldn't be an awful lot on the site, but also would mean that we'd implicitly remove access to the bowls club, because I think by default, and if you look at the line on the map, the road to the bowls club remains in its current location, and there's no intention to remove it, although there is an option for the developer to provide it in a different way. I mean, have I understood the discussion of the role of the road to the bowls club to enable disabled access to the bowls club? Mr. Bakey, do you have any comments on that?
Following Councillor Lee raising this before with us in the member briefing with the TOTS local plan team, they're still saying Environment Agency requirements are 8 metres, and that does take into account the road down the side of the building. So at the moment we're saying it's local plan people are saying 8 metres is what the requirement is going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. And I don't think a new planning application would automatically require somebody to remove the road that enables access. Okay, thank you. And it's also why, as for reference, we've always described this as a site that's surrounded by tarmac on all 4 sides. So there is the road that enables you access to the bowls club, there is the parking at the bowls club, there is the footpath that enables you to access to the play area, and there is the car park in front. So there is tarmac on all 4 sides of the site as things currently stand by default. Councillor Laming raised this point about moving ahead before clarification coming out of the local plan. Could someone provide perspective on how we expect the local plan to interact with this proposal? Mr. Bakey, maybe.
So, as I understand it, we're expecting the inspector's report in late August, maybe early September. We'll be in the middle of actually procuring marketing agents. So we're expecting the report to be available before we actually start going out for the expressions of interest.
Yeah.
So if the inspector does propose anything different here, we'll be in a position to take that into account.
Thank you. There's also, maybe this is a legal question to Mr. John. There's a reference to who owns the site. Now, the indenture uses a historic term for describing the city council, I believe. But your understanding is there is no ambiguity. It is the city council that owns this site, and in this particular case, the district, just so we're all clear on that.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, absolutely. I'm confident there's no ambiguity there, and we're the owner of the site.
Thank you very much indeed. That's helpful clarification. In terms of, I'd like to thank Councillor Tippett Cooper for his support, and it is useful to hear that local residents are firmly of the view that we need to get on and do something. So I realise there's a whole bunch of councillors here today who've explained why we shouldn't do anything, or why it's all very complicated and we should kick it into the long grass. I think his point that this decision might be, for example, if the county council's proposals go ahead, made by a council based in Basingstoke rather than one in Winchester, is a meaningful one, and it is important that we proceed at pace and ensure that we do not allow this to be delayed until after local government reorganisation. Finally, Councillor Godfrey supports our use of best value, agrees with the disposal, doesn't want to over restrict usage and allow the market free play. And he talks about the covenant restricting industrial housing, which if those of you who are interested in historical matters actually refers to things like the Peabody Trust and early precursors to housing associations and social housing. That was the specific thing that they were trying to prevent, which is not necessarily something I think we would agree with in today's world. But I think that is one where the local plan sets the settlement boundary in such a way as we would not put housing in River Park. So I don't agree with extending housing into the park area, and I think most residents would be of a similar view, and that's a good example of where we're taking residents' views into account. Chief Executive, are there any points I've missed that were raised? Or
No, no.
Thank you. Okay, so I hope everybody feels I've addressed the comments they've made. Cabinet, are there any questions from colleagues on this paper? Any debate? Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. I would like to address a couple of issues that were brought up by the speakers, particularly in the absence of Councillor Becker. A reference was made to a shortage of open space in St Bartholomew's ward, and it is true that there is a 2.83 hectare shortage of open space in that ward. However, this has arisen because of boundaries being redrawn where previously it was adequate. And I think it's also worth pointing out that the neighbouring St Michael's ward has a surplus of 34 hectares of open space, and they are right next to each other. And I think in comparison to elsewhere in the city, we have St Barnabas with a shortfall of nearly 30 hectares, and St Paul's again, which has over a 31 hectare shortage of open space in its area. So certainly when we're looking at open space, I think we need to concentrate the resources of the city council where we have genuine and significant shortfalls of open space and look at how we address those. This is a relatively small site. in terms of the acreage of open space right next to it. We need to make really good use of that site. And I think the points about keeping control of that process while we have a city council in place which genuinely cares about the city and its people is really important. The other issue is, like the leader, I was slightly baffled by the recollection of the previous administration's deliberations, but fortunately with the wonders of modern technology in front of me, I would like to point Councillor Godfrey's attention to CAB 3093 on the 31st of October 2018, which was the last paper, I believe, agreed by the previous administration, which refers to generating revenue or a significant capital receipt in paragraph 2.5. Councillor Godfrey was absent for that meeting as he gave his apologies, but certainly reference was made to the need to generate financial benefit from the site on the basis of the financial situation that the council was in at that time. And I think it's important that we recognise that that financial situation, while we've been doing a good job of managing it, those financial difficulties which are faced by the public sector as a whole have not gone away. I think the proposal in front of us today is a sensible and pragmatic way forward. I think we certainly hope that the opportunity will come forward to have achieve significant public benefit from the site, but we do have to recognise that that has to be long-term financially viable options for both this council and whoever takes that site on. It is a really important site in the city centre. As has been pointed out, we're investing significantly in the local area, and we're talking about further improvements in the park over the next few years, which I hope will come forward as well. But this does need sorting and we do need to move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, just very briefly, actually. Firstly, can I say it's hugely much more enjoyable talking about River Park at this cabinet meeting than it was when we last had a paper to discuss a project there. So thank you for all the contributions that have been made in a very calm manner. For me, the real danger of not going ahead and agreeing the recommendations before you is the fact that we've got local government reorganisation coming, and what we don't want is a decision to be made about the site by another body who will have very, very different priorities to this authority. I certainly was one who I was extremely disappointed by the University of Southampton's decision not to proceed with developing the site in the way that they had expressed. I was really looking forward to having more art space, more start-up space, gallery space, a concert hall that would be available for groups, local groups to use. But we are where we are, and it seems to me that this is the best way forward to actually get on with it. So I will be supporting the recommendations before us, and I think we've just got to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Cromwelson.
Thank you, Leader. I think just to lay out the principles that I'm thinking about here, that, you know, the way I think about this, the decision today is a decision to market the site of the former leisure centre for sale, to find a new investor to bring value to our district. It's not a project post-mortem about what happened, didn't happen in the past. It's a decision about the proposal in front of us. And in this proposal, what I see is a clear red line that defines the scope and, more importantly, or as importantly, what is not in scope. It provides some feedback about initial public expressions of wish. It's a wish list in that sense. And I'd sort of really stress, let's bear in mind that's a wish list. It defines a process, and within that process there are at least 2 stages where there is an opportunity for the public to consult and have its input on what's presented at that particular point in time. It also defines the criteria by which bids will be assessed, and that includes community value, it includes financial viability, etc., etc. And I'm sure there'll be many discussions about what works, what doesn't work, etc., etc. I have to say, you know, I'm recently new to this committee, the Cabinet Committee. I have been keeping my ears to the ground, and I listen to and I talk to many people, not just in my ward, but around the whole area. And I know that many people are frustrated. Many of my close friends are, you know, hugely frustrated that, you know, nothing has happened. And I'm, you know, reminded of a good friend of mine who sadly no longer with us, who would just be saying, just do it. Now, those of you who know your brands will know that that's got a very strong connection to sports and leisure. And I think that's a good way of thinking about what needs to happen here. Some people have said to me that, you know, frankly, a plan should have been put in place at the initial point of agreeing contracts to move ahead on the new leisure park. Now, I wasn't around in those days, don't know all the ins and outs, but, you know, a quick look at the papers suggests that maybe that should have been put in place so that there was already a plan in place when the new leisure park opened, not wait until it's open and then start processing. We all know that getting things through the proper processes in the council takes a long time. So it should have been started then. And when I've had those discussions with, you know, very close friends of mine, it's been difficult to justify why that didn't happen. So in short, you know, people are saying, just get on with it. Sometimes they say it much less politely. And for me, those are the fundamentals on which I am going to support the recommendations in this paper. And I've certainly not heard anything that suggests that we should delay. And if I may just refer to Lucy Taylor's representation, what I would say about that is it's great to have a very constructive, positive proposal promoted. I know they've done a great job in terms of getting public opinion behind the idea. I think it would bring something new to the whole district. But, you know, we all know that running a Lido is it's not an easy thing. It can be expensive. And what I would encourage the Lido group to do is to express its views to potential operators and encourage them to come forward with a sensible proposition, and then it will go into the mix for decisions against the criteria that have been set. So just to repeat, I shall be supporting the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any Councillor Porter?
I too will be supporting the decision. I think it shows our commitment to the site for the whole district. The old leisure centre site really was open to absolutely everyone right across the whole district, and we want that to happen again. And I'm pleased it gives people a say every step of the way. I think that's this paper makes that really clear, and I think that's important too. It's always a challenge when a new development has to come along when a site has not necessarily worked the first time round. So I'm also very pleased that we're attempting to de-risk this site as we have with other sites, to take away some of that work that would need to be done by each potential developer is a really useful piece of work. And so I don't think that's about spending public money unnecessarily. I think it's worth doing. The site has got constraints of flooding and covenants. But as the person that's looking after the local plan, I'd also say this would have to respect the local plan, and it would have to respect our very strong commitment to the nature of that site as well. The nature in terms of its way it's used, but also the nature in way of the ecology of it. We are absolutely fully committed to having an area for recreation and culture for the whole district, and this site demonstrates that every single day of the week and every single year. We have events in the night time, we have events at the weekend, we have festivals, we have sport, we have park run, which is often a tourism thing actually, as well as just as a sport thing. So I think that we understand exactly what the purpose of that park is, and that whatever comes forward has to work for that area. A comment to Lucy, I've learned a new sentence now about being the right to joy. I think it's amazing the way people climb in, including me, into freezing cold water and go, oh, isn't this lovely? So I think it's very interesting to see, to hear you and to hear about the enthusiasm of over 3,000 people. It's a whole, we want to see this for a whole community support though, for the whole of our community. And I just put out a quick call for children. Can this please be joyous for children too? I think that Winchester really needs to make sure that every tourist opportunity, every community opportunity offers an opportunity for children too. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Porter. I think what I've heard from everybody is there's a consensus that we need to get on with it. As is so often, we've heard endless reasons why we shouldn't do things. So we shouldn't do it because we haven't done lots of surveys, and we shouldn't go ahead with the plan because it includes lots of surveys. We shouldn't do it because the local plan is too restrictive, and we shouldn't do it because the local plan is not restrictive enough. We shouldn't do it because of obscure documents from 100 years ago, and we shouldn't do it because we should be ignoring obscure documents from 100 years ago. So the normal onslaught of reasons to do nothing and leave it as derelict, and then quickly followed up by a complaint that it hasn't happened already and that it's derelict. And I'm sorry, I was more struck by the people who had positive and imaginative things to say. It was very striking, and I'd like to thank the public deputations. So they were the people who most clearly laid out possibilities for this site. They talked about what was possible, what would benefit for the community. And I would add Councillor Tippett-Cooper to that list in the public deputation stage, not thinking about endless reasons why everything is wrong, but what could happen. And I have to confess, I'm team what could happen, team what's possible, team what, let's get on with it. That's the team I'm on, and I think it's, from what I've heard of Cabinet colleagues, that's the team that we're all on. Now that doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. I'm not afraid of market forces and what they come forward with, but I also believe that it is important to set direction as well. So we have defined the scope, we've defined the footprint, we've made it really clear that green space is protected. We've laid forward a sensible and pragmatic approach that listens to and involves people. We're clear about the importance of public benefit. We're clear also that through a chain of local government reorganisations, it has ended up as a district asset, and the views and input of the district are important as well when we're talking about potentially such a large sum of money. So I think we have a paper in front of us today that sets a positive way forward, and after having heard all the points that have been made, but particularly valuing the points made by the public here today, I would like to propose that we proceed. So colleagues, the recommendations in front of us are to note the feedback from the resident engagement undertaken in June 2025, agree the recommended approach to market the site for sale and find a new investor, including the evaluation criteria as set out in paragraph 11.8, agree that resident engagement events will take place following the receipt of expressions of interest stage and following the final bid, as part of the ongoing and continued commitment to residents and stakeholder engagement, approve a budget of £130,000 to fund the marketing, delegate authority to the strategic director with responsibility for the former leisure centre to market the site and invite bids, and note that a further report will be brought back to Cabinet with a recommendation to approve the sale of the site preferred bidder. Cabinet, do you agree with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to the next paper. The Corner House North Walls Winchester paper. And there is an exempt element to this, which means that if we do get into needing to discuss that element of the paper, the meeting will need to go into private session. So can I ask Councillor Reach to introduce the paper, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so the paper in front of us today, the agenda item 9, is dealing with property that the council owns, Corner House North Walls, which is in St Michael Ward, which is also my ward here in Winchester. Council has a policy of acquiring properties for social and affordable rent where it makes sense to do so. And since 2020, we've acquired 43 such properties, one of which is Corner House. Each of these properties, except Corner House, is now in social or affordable rent. Some of them, one of them has been used for temporary accommodation, but primarily they've gone social and affordable rent quite quickly. Corner House was purchased as part of a portfolio of 6 properties in 2020, which was agreed by Cabinet papers which are referenced in this particular paper, but CAB 3216 on the 22nd of January 2020, and CAB 3231 on the 2nd of March 2020. Those papers agreed to acquire properties in the pandemic when prices were reasonable, but subject to a positive financial assessment and subject to the final price of those properties. So as I said, of all of those properties, 5 have been successfully let, but with Corner House still, as we know, unused. Since that date, we carried out further financial analysis, initially in December 2021, to check it was still viable. And that led to submission of planning application in April of 2022. Now, that planning application took an unbelievable 22 months to come to fruition. So it was only in spring of 2024 when planning was finally granted. Now, the reason for that delay, as set out in the paper, was primarily owing to nitrate neutrality, which held up development right across the district, right across the watershed for the Itchen, as we know, and is indeed an issue that we still face today. Now, during those 22 months, there was huge upheaval in the macroeconomic environment. We had trustonomics, we had massive inflation right across the board, but particularly in contract and consulting. This has meant that since that time, it's become very difficult to make this project viable. Now, I took over this portfolio around 2 months ago, and since that time, I've worked with officers to reappraise all of the projects that we had in flight. We've already taken a couple of items to council, talking about some changes in policy we'd like to make. And today, I'm bringing this before you because I don't think it's right to continue with Corner House as it is. Now, the paper before you summarises why we've got that position. Now, the options appraisal to continue with Corner House is set at paragraph 2.7. There are various options we've explored. This is a précis of the huge range of options we've looked at. And then also I'd draw your attention to paragraph 2.15, which sets out comparators elsewhere in the market. Now, this demonstrates that it's not good value for money to proceed with the Corner House scheme as is. The scheme itself would be a very expensive way of providing 1-bed flats, which we know are in demand, certainly here in the middle of Winchester, but it would be an extremely expensive way of doing that. I think the £1.8 million that we had allocated to do that redevelopment could be better spent elsewhere. and I'm sure we could get more bang for our buck. We've already heard this morning about the importance of value for money and using council taxpayers' money wisely, and that is the overwhelming consideration here. So I think, well, I know, and I'm advising that Cabinet takes the decision to dispose of Corner House on the market, on the open market, to achieve best value for money and reinvest that £1.8 million in our unallocated Homes Fund to get better bang for our buck elsewhere. And I am, of course, happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we get to questions, we have some public deputation, or a public deputation on the subject from Mr. Tate, and then representations from a couple of councillors. So, Mr. Tate, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet regarding the future of the Corner House. I have spoken at a number of committees about this issue, and on the 14th of October last year, I addressed Cabinet regarding the progress of the Corner House. I directly questioned the viability of the conversion of the building into 6 flats, 3 of which are substandard sizes. Shocking. Just to recap, in January 2020, the council outbid a local business by £50,000 and paid £500,000 for the property. It was unconditional. It was against policy to convert from commercial to residential. Very questionable. Since owning the building, the council has done literally nothing with it until a couple of days ago when the painters turned up. It's paid £41,000 for the planning. As of April this year, it's paid £70,767.69 for business rates, and that's accumulating at £1,000 a month. There was stamp duty, £14,500. There's the notional interest charge. All in all, you've got costs about £800,000. To conceal the council's incompetence, and this is members, not officers, you've decided to deflect the public attention by using an exempt paper. I think I know more about this project than certainly any cabinet member and probably most of the officers. There was no proper business case. I knew that, and I've got some development experience when it was bought. It wasn't viable. Councillor Lerney took that decision with a back of the fag packet appraisal. Remember, it's the council's tenants who are going to have to pick up the costs here. So at the moment, you've got I can't see what those papers are, £800,000. You're going to get probably £350 back. You're going to pay estate agents' costs. The council tenants are going to lose £400,000. I'm not blaming Councillor Reach. He's a breath of fresh air to take on that position. Quentin Brooke, a local resident, has absolutely doggedly fought on this. He picked it up that I was asking about this soon after it was purchased, because I questioned with officers, how could you buy unconditionally the pub and assume that you can get residential use on it? The right to buy monies, that was the motivation for buying it in the first place, because you'd have lost that 30%. The right to buy would have been clawed back. This is a disaster. Obfuscation. The officer has written a very good report under the most difficult circumstances, but really members should be ashamed. And I feel, as someone who's passionate about affordable housing and the council's housing stock, it's our council tenants who are paying the cost of this disaster.
Thank you very much indeed for your comments, Mr. Tate. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Leader. This project has been raised a couple of times at Scrutiny Committee, including by members of the public. The first time this issue was raised is Scrutiny in February 2025. Leader, you agreed at that meeting to return to the committee with more detail about how the original decision was taken. I'm therefore a little surprised to see it before Cabinet today, as this has not happened. I believe the outstanding Scrutiny Committee questions are whether the proper procedures were followed when the council purchased the property and whether a proper business case was prepared. I've seen the narrative in section 2 or para 2 of the paper before Cabinet today, which you may believe answers the questions. I'd be grateful if you please confirm that the correct procedures were duly followed. My only other question relates to selling the property under freehold or leasehold. If the aim is to dispose of the corner house as quickly as possible to reduce council liabilities for this undeveloped property and to maximise proceeds for reinvestment into Winchester's affordable accommodation, can I ask why we may even be thinking about leasehold sale? I'm sure the officers will correct me, but I understand that freehold disposal tends to offer several advantages: higher market value, simpler sale process, faster transaction. I'd be grateful for confirmation in answer to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much. And I'm so pleased to hear from you, Councillor Todd, that you decide to throw off the indecisive character of your administration and now proceed with some of the major projects. Winchester will be a better place if any of these major projects that has been bogged down for most of the last 6 years can now make some tangible progress. This paper reports that it's taken 5 years of no action before the administration has finally been embarrassed enough to take the action that should have been taken many years ago. Do something with this property or sell it. Sitting on it just costs money and shuts people out from the homes that are so urgently needed, or to return it to employment use. The administration has frequently complained about empty homes in our district and the impact on those in housing need. And yet it is this administration that is sitting on the dozens of properties that could provide homes for so many, whether they are affordable or market homes. The demand in Winchester for both is great. Act now on the corner house, on the property holdings in the Broadway, in central Winchester, and on many other sites that the City Council owns. Stop blocking the housing that so many people need in Winchester.
Thank you very much, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Reach, would you like to respond to the points raised?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, councillors and Mr. Tate, for your comments. I think, although I only had one coffee for today, I think we are in agreement here. I think each of us, we're making the same point, some slightly more sober, some slightly more passionate, but I think we're making the same point here. The recommendations here are saying get on and do something with Corner House and do something that's best value. So I think we're in violent agreement. There are some specific points, particularly around freehold or leasehold. I might pass to officers for that question in a second. But I think, speed is of the essence here. I'm aware there may have already been some approaches from businesses and individuals and other interested parties, as you might expect, it being such a prominent site. So perhaps the freehold and leasehold options give us an ability to get a kind of, do something with this project, but this property. And I agree with Councillor Godfrey, act now and Corner House, we are. That's why we're in Cabinet here today. Mr. Hendy, did you have any comments on the freehold, leasehold question from Councillor Lee, please?
Yes, thank you. I think that's probably referring to paragraph 11.9, where it's saying recommend Corner House is sold either freehold or leasehold on the open market. Obviously, we will respond to whatever the market offer is, either freehold or leasehold. So we're not being prescriptive in relation to the nature of the disposal.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly tap into the point about appraisals that were done on this site. It's a question maybe for Mr. Hendy. The council, can you just confirm that the council, and it slightly ties into the point that was made by Councillor Lee. As I have pointed out, I came back 12 minutes after the request from the Scrutiny Committee and highlighted how the decision was taken. I'd read the papers and highlighted that the Cabinet had authorised to go ahead and use receipts in order to buy properties. but that there had to be a financial viability assessment. So just to read the paragraph in question, even though there was a list of properties listed, the quote was, as these potential property acquisitions identified are still subject to negotiation with vendors and require financial viability assessments, they may not go ahead. So other properties may also need to be considered. That was the authorization that was given to officers. And we have looked at the paperwork and the paper trail, and those financial viability assessments were done. And the negotiation with vendors was done. And I think it's important to note that there were in practice multiple financial viability assessments over the life of the project. And in particular, the two checkpoints which we absolutely require of officers. One is a financial viability assessment ahead of purchase, and the other is a financial viability assessment ahead of submitting a planning application. Both of those were done and showed that it was a viable project. I mean, could you clarify the position, Mr. Handy?
Thank you, Leader. As you said, there are a range of appraisals undertaken on this scheme. Originally, an appraisal was undertaken which showed the scheme showed a very healthy net present value at that point in time. And it's worth noting that the cost of build and the interest rates that were applied to that appraisal were substantially below what they were later on in subsequent years. But you're right, at each stage of the progression of this scheme, we undertook appraisals to identify the amount of subsidy that would be required to make this scheme viable in the overall housing revenue account business plan to pay back over the life of the plan. So those do exist, but just to reiterate, at the beginning of this, there was a very healthy net present value and business case to support the acquisition and development of this project.
Thank you very much indeed. There was also a comment made about that we made an assumption that we would buy a pub and assume residential use. I believe we did get planning application through, so we bought a pub and we did get residential use. Is that correct? I mean, that was some of the work that was being done in the meantime.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I spoke in favour of it myself at the planning committee, which I think was in April of 22 initially. But yes, we got that planning permission.
Thank you. And there was also points about the council blocking housing. I believe we're building more houses at the moment. We have the fastest delivery rate of any council in Hampshire and the Solent. Is that a correct summary? That's a planning question. Well, it is correct, by the way. So, and there was a reference to empty homes, the council having empty homes. Do we have any long-term empty homes apart from this one?
We have some long-term empty properties, as any landlord would have in relation to the condition of stock to bring back into use. But you're aware, Leader, one of the key performance indicators that you're always keen to look at is the void turnaround time, which would include the time taken to bring short-term and long-term empty properties back into use.
Thank you very much indeed. Indeed, that is something we very actively scrutinise and chase. Now, there is also an exempt paper. First of all, Cabinet, do you have any questions about the paper as it currently stands? Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I'd just like to explore the right to buy money that was there, that I understood at the time was quite urgent to spend it because it hadn't been spent for quite some time. Can you or any of the officers perhaps explain that problem at the time? Because this was just really as we were coming into authority.
Yes, so this was considerably before my time, but I believe that I know there was a time limit on the use of right to buy receipts, and that was timing out, I believe, in mid 2020. So I think a decision was taken to quite urgently purchase what was available in early of 2020 to make sure that those right to buy receipts didn't time out.
And I think that's a very helpful point. I mean, do we know how much right to buy were we talking about? Because presumably that is money that would have been lost if we hadn't gone ahead with that particular
Don't have that figure to hand, but I'm sure we can come back at some point.
Any other questions? Just looking at no other questions. Do any of the councillors present or any cabinet members want to make a presentation on the exempt paper, in which case we will need to move into exempt session?
Mr. Chairman, I was going to speak on the exempt paper, but I believe the pertinent facts have been mentioned quite clearly by Councillor Tate during the open session. Thank you.
Okay. I've just noticed, of course, as you know, that both the minutes and the original exempt appendix have been depinked, and they talk about right to buy receipts of 1.275 million. So that is the money that would have been lost if we hadn't actually gone ahead with this programme. So that also needs to be borne into account. If we hadn't made the decision that we did in March 2020, we would have written a cheque to the government for 1.275 million. And I think it's quite important to highlight that in terms of our thinking of the decision-making process overall. Councillor Porter.
Can I clarify that those had been building up over quite a while? It wasn't just something that had occurred in the last 12 months before that date.
Yeah, I think it'd be, yes. I mean, Councillor Loney might be able to provide more perspective. What was clear was that there wasn't an adequate system in place for tracking the progress of right to buy receipts. And so we inherited a situation where there was suddenly a large sum of money that we needed to spend quite quickly. There is now a proper process in place to ensure that right to buy receipts are spent more evenly over time. But I don't know if any officers want to provide more clarity on that, or Councillor Loney maybe.
Yes, it's correct, as you've stated. And indeed, after following this, a proper process was put into place. But Mr. Hendy may want to confirm that.
Is it still in place?
We're in the fortunate position now where the government's changed the rules and there's no payback period, so we don't have to have a process on that. We have the ability to spend receipts, but previous to that, I believe there was a system to manage that, to make sure we never fell foul of the requirements whereby we would have to pay back and also incur the interest penalty that was associated with it.
So, Cabinet, I'm assuming that we've already read the exempt paper. And I'm not seeing that there are any questions on it, and I think we can probably manage the debate without making reference to it. So do we have any debate? Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. I find it surprising, well, perhaps not surprising, but the two former members of the administration have taken this as a separate element to a whole deal where there had been no proper arrangement for dealing with right to buy receipts, and that this 1.275 million would have been lost. And if you look at the scheme as a whole, of where 5 other properties were bought at the time that had come into the housing account, it was a successful decision. One element of this scheme did not work. Now, I've heard Councillor Godfrey many times saying we should be more entrepreneurial, and I think something of an 80% success rate in one particular scheme is pretty good for an entrepreneurial scheme. So I find the criticism difficult. We had one element of the scheme that didn't work due to the circumstances. This decision was taken just before we went into lockdown. No one could have predicted the changes that would have happened in what was a very sound business appraisal at the beginning. 5 other properties were bought and are successfully part of the housing revenue account now and occupied and have provided good social value for 5 years. And one element of the scheme will lose money, but the scheme in totality, if we'd returned the 1.275 million, this scheme is still positive, a positive outcome to the housing revenue account.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other debate? No, I think this is a sensible and pragmatic way forward. This has not been the happiest experience for the council. It was an idea that at the time made sense, but the combination of phosphates, nitrates and Liz Truss crashing the economy meant that the project, by the time we got to the point that we were going to be able to execute it, no longer made sense. And so in light of that, the proposal on the table, which is to dispose, dare I say it, fits in with the principles that were talked about earlier by Councillor Godfrey, and also the principles that we're following. So I think the recommendations in front of us absolutely make sense from this point onwards. So Cabinet, we're being asked to authorise the corporate head of asset management to dispose of the corner house in North Walls in the open market on a freehold or leasehold basis, and to note that the £1.8 million assigned for the scheme in the capital programme will be subsumed into the unallocated 1,000 homes scheme to increase the investment in other affordable accommodation subject to authority to spend. Cabinet, do you agree with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Good, thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is item 10, which is to note the future items for consideration by Cabinet as shown on the forward plan. So do you agree to note those items? Thank you very much indeed. And items 11 and 12 were on the assumption that we would move to exempt business, which we're not going to do. So on that basis, the business of the meeting is finished.